Video games have evolved in a way that it's now attracted the attention of famous celebrities and actors. Nowadays, you can load up any game and instantly recognize your celebrity crush, like Mr. John Wick in Cyberpunk, or the Chicken Man in Far Cry 6. The first game to have Hollywood representation was Night Trap in 1992, which featured teen actress Dana Plato. The whole game was presented as a full motion video, or FMV, so it just felt like you were watching a movie while you pressed a button every now and then. As time went on, technological enhancements like motion capture and texture mapping could add a new realm of realism into a character model, and it made playing as your favorite actor or actress possible. Then somebody had the crazy idea to have a Die Hard actor be in a Die Hard game that was not named and had no affiliation with Die Hard at all. And that game was Apocalypse for the PlayStation 1. Apocalypse is an action-adventure video game that features legendary action movie star Bruce Willis. The game was originally developed and published by Activision's in-house studio, and had Bruce Willis do his own motion capture, record his own voiceovers, and have his face texture mapped into a computer-generated model. Of course, Bruce Willis's characters were already in movie-licensed video games like Die Hard Trilogy and The Fifth Element, but he had nothing to do with those games. Apocalypse might be the first original video game to have direct involvement with a Hollywood superstar, and made a real-life person actually become a video game character. But initially, you weren't supposed to play as Bruce Willis. Apocalypse was supposed to have sort of a buddy system, with Bruce Willis being your partner named Trey Kincaid, and yourself being just a random dude. The game used an AI-controlled person to fight alongside you and pick up some useful power-ups for you to use. The only problem is that it didn't work properly, but the game was already close to finish, and it was even showcased in E3 in 1997 with Bruce Willis attending, where it was completely overshadowed by the likes of Metal Gear Solid, Fallout, Half-Life, Banjo-Kazooie, Resident Evil 2, Final Fantasy VII, Star Fox 64. Yeah, there's a reason why you haven't heard about this game. The game was then delayed for a whole year to a late 1998 release. And by the start of that year, good old Neversoft stepped in and reworked the whole game engine, which eventually became the same engine you see in Spider-Man for the PS1 and the first two Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. Neversoft also decided to ditch the whole AI partner system and instead made you play as Bruce Willis himself. And in theory, giving your main asset, which was paid millions of dollars, a lead role would make the game more appealing. But what did they have to sacrifice in order to make this possible? In this video, we'll see if these changes were necessary to make a memorable Hollywood-like experience that you couldn't find in movie theaters. When we first start up the game, we see the intro cutscene, which is just a montage of other cutscenes that are in the game. Then you're taken into the main menu, which doesn't have a lot. You could just adjust your basic audio and video settings, or change the difficulty in the options menu. The whole story of the game is simple. Basically, an evil scientist, known as the Reverend, summons the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from the dead to bring an end to the world. You play as Trey Kincaid, a student of the Reverend. He gets taken into a prison facility because he's the only person that knows that the Reverend wants to start Judgment Day.
How would you plead?
I'm gonna stick my foot so far up your
Guilty! I sentence you to death. May the Lord have mercy on your soul. Amen.
Was that a sentence or a prayer? Trey is then thrown into his prison cell with a friendly-looking neighbor that wants to give us a warm welcome, only for him to be knocked out by something that the guards didn't bother taking away. Trey then instantly 3D prints a goddamn assault rifle with his hands and starts his escape from prison.
Welcome to paradise.
So that's definitely a start to the game. Nothing is explained whatsoever, and you just gotta roll with the punches while it's being flung at you. And so your quest to stop the Reverend begins. The game is played in sort of a twin-stick shooter format, with the D-pad being your movement, and the face buttons making you shoot your gun in whatever button your face button is located. So the square button shoots your gun to the left, the triangle button shoots forward, and so on and so forth. If you had a DualShock controller, then you can use the left stick for movement and right stick for shooting if you want a bit more precision. Your base machine gun has unlimited ammo, but as you travel along the game, then you can pick up the more powerful weapons that use its own ammunition. You can manage and cycle through these by pressing L2 and save the more powerful weapons for bigger waves of enemies or bosses. To aid in this, you can also pick up smart bombs, which causes a big fart blast around you and greatly damages anybody in its radius. You can pick up a lot of these, but you really don't need to save 15 of them. You could also jump and crouch in this game, which gives it a bit more depth compared to other games, but you'll see that one will be more important than the other. And I hope you like Bruce Willis's voice, because you're gonna hear it over and over and over and—
Bring it on, baby! Strap one on, it's time to jam! You guys need a little bit more lead in their diet. You guys need a little bit more lead in their diet. You guys need a little bit more lead in their diet.
Then we escape on a conveniently placed hover bike and all of a sudden crash through a manhole on the wall and delve deep into the sewers. Now we have to fight our way through the sewers, platform through some rocks, and fight the one thing guarding our exit. A crocodile. A goddamn crocodile. Oh well, shoot it to death, I guess. Trey escapes the sewers and heads straight into the city, where everybody's out to get him, and oh my god, this is where things start to get insane. You're now introduced to these helicopters that drop a lot of bombs on you, and everything is just going to hell. The ground is being cracked open with exposed lava, buildings are blowing up and collapsing. Everyone and everything is out to get you. But that's okay, because System of a Down is playing on the big screen. This part of the game shows you how crazy things can get, not only with what you're seeing, but how slow things can run. This game was meant to have a lot of action happening on screen, but when it does happen, there's a ton of slowdown. The PS1 can't handle processing everything that's happening in a single battle segment, and that makes it a lot harder to play. But if you could get through all that, then you're greeted with your old scientist friend, Larry, who is actually one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And now you go face to face with the first real boss of the game. And now he's dead. Alright, moving on. The whole place blows up and we continue our escape through the rooftops. Nothing really happens on the rooftops. It's just more jumping from building to building, shooting more enemies and machinery, shimmying along tightropes, and watching another music video. And the boss at the end is another helicopter, which is basically what you've been fighting throughout this whole level. Then we see an announcement from the President of the United States declaring that the Reverend is dead, and that Mr. Willis over here is responsible for defying his actions. To lay low from all the action, we head to the graveyard, where we get into more action with zombies, but this was all for good reason, because now we get to meet up with our supposed ex-girlfriend, Mary Magdalene, only to, lo and behold, be one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So to defeat her, you just jump and shoot and dodge, and that's really it. After defeating her, Bruce realizes that she had killer machine implants from a killer machine company. So you head over there and chase after the owner and... Okay, let me slow down for a second. I know it sounds like I'm going through this game very quickly, and I am. It's a relatively short game. But with how much is happening on the screen, there's not a lot happening in this action story. You're kinda going from location to location, shooting everything that gets in your way, and that's literally everything. And don't get me wrong, it's super duper fun and the game does get more difficult as you progress. With more enemy types and heavy machinery you have to destroy, you really have to be on your toes and manage your power-ups or use some life-saving smart bombs to survive some of these levels. But the story of the game is just sort of happening. I mean, the first half of the game is just Bruce running away from people that are trying to off him and conveniently running into some of the horsemen of the apocalypse along the way. Then it takes 6 different levels for him to actively look for a horseman. The music in this game is also completely forgettable. I'm not talking about the licensed music that happens every now and then for a 20-second loop. I mean the ones that play throughout the level and some of the music you've been listening to in the background of this video. But it's not like you're gonna hear the music anyway, because you're already dealing with laser beams and rockets and robots exploding and one-liners like it's a Michael Bay film! Not only that, but Bruce Willis's voice acting in these cutscenes is just amazing to say the least.
Larry! I thought you were dead!
I'll be damned. Was it you who crashed the chopper out?
That's not a chopper, baby, it's a hover bike.
The Reverend is dead. The Reverend's not dead.
What's going on out there?
Candygram!
This looks like the right spot.
Nice polygons.
But now we get to the war factory and chase the owner of the place, Rafer. So you get to fight some armored robots and get into some trickier platforming sections. And by trickier, I really mean god-awful. Not only do you have a bunch of enemies that are harder to kill, but you also have to navigate through a series of moving platforms with a lava pit at the bottom. This and the increased lag spikes as you destroy a bunch of exploding robots on the screen and camera angles that make you want to rip your hair apart, then you get a recipe for the worst designed level in platforming history. There's a bunch of times where you have to wait on a moving platform while enemies keep firing at you. So you just gotta hope for the best and pray they don't shoot you. This is the most complex that platforming has ever gotten in the game, and the developers decided to forget everything they knew about level design and wanted you to suffer. When you finally leave the war factory, you catch up to the owner and destroy his ship. That gets him really mad, and surprise, he's one of the 4 horsemen.
It's hero time. Hero time!
War has different phases. Damage him enough and he turns big. Even though he already did in the cutscene, but oh well. So he starts chasing you like it's a Crash Bandicoot level, and your weapons don't do nearly as much damage as the other bosses. Now you have to shoot at explosive barrels when he gets close enough to do big damage. Keep doing this and the boss fight is pretty much over with. After that's done, you go to the White House all of a sudden and decide to take out the president. In-game, oh my god, in-game. So you just shoot whatever's in front of you, scale up the White House that's surrounded in lava, break in, fight these demons dressed as agents, jump through what looks like active volcanoes, and you've reached the president's office. The president doesn't like this, so he shows his true form. And this one's a doozy of a fight. His first phase is just fighting inside his office. Then he destroys it to reveal that you're in hell, giving him more movement for attacks. This is where the beast really shines. He's always moving towards you, creating shockwaves every time he stomps, and destroying parts of the ground when he gets damaged enough. If you're far away, he throws flaming boulders. Get too close and he'll do a quick swipe that's too fast to react to. You really have to be efficient in moving around and platforming if you want to beat him. Other than that, you just keep shooting and eventually it'll be over. But when you finally defeat him, he turns into the Reverend, who is... Bruce Willis finally guns the Reverend down, only for his body to be taken over mere seconds later. And then the game ends. So overall, the story is pretty meh, but the gameplay is just good old-fashioned arcadey fun. It's nothing super revolutionary, but I think it was good just to blast through. It wasn't perfect though. There were a few times where I thought crouching or rolling could be utilized more effectively, like here when enemies can take cover behind a barrier. You can also crouch and take cover, but what's the point when you have unlimited ammo and limitless movement? That being said, you don't have to gun down every enemy you come across. Most of the gameplay is not mandatory, and you can skip through a lot of gunfights if you felt speedy. But if you wanted to play just for fun, there's a ton of cheats you can mess around with. Some of these include invincibility, unlimited lives, level select, being able to select a checkpoint in a level, and having all of the power-ups right off the bat. There's also a cheat where you can have never-ending falling, which, I mean, does what it's supposed to. But if you hold L1 and R1 together, then you can clip through walls and control Bruce Willis freely. Sort of like a debug feature. And I love using this cheat because sometimes you can break the game's loading sequences and have parts of the level missing. And other times you can just zip by everybody knowing they can never hurt you. There were also a lot of inconsistencies with the story. Like, how did Trey know the Reverend was summoning the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse? How is the Reverend powerful enough to sentence me to death? Why did he choose people I know as the Horsemen? If the Reverend raised the Horsemen from the dead, does that mean my ex-girlfriend or even the President died before all of this? And if so, how did Trey not know any of it? Why am I questioning this 25-year-old game? Even with all of these inconsistencies, I can't pick apart this game too much, because it pretty much went through a huge overhaul through the last leg of development. If you look at some of the unreleased footage before Neversoft joined, you can see that some cutscenes included the character you were actually supposed to play as, along with Bruce Willis. And in the final release, there are scenes where Bruce has just enough space to have his partner by his side. The cutscenes were heavily edited to remove any trace of this other character. So there could have been a better fleshed out story if the game retained any of the previous cutscenes and dialogues. Would the story be better? Maybe not, but at least it would have made more sense. The only problem with that is you'd have to revert back to the original game's mechanics as well, and get to hear Bruce constantly screaming. But I like the version that we got. Because if we were to have 2 gunners shooting explosive rockets and laser beams into hordes of enemies, then the PlayStation would have exploded, which is probably why there's no multiplayer in this game, even though having it would have made sense. In the end, something would have been sacrificed if the game decided to go with or without Neversoft, but the gameplay was ultimately prioritized to make the game more enjoyable to play. Even though this video game is known as the Bruce Willis game, a lot of the stuff that he worked on, like some of his animations and dialogues, were cut from the final release. I mean, where do you see this in the game? It was just way too ambitious to make the game that was initially drawn up by Activision, and most of Bruce Willis's performance was scrapped for a more simple concept. And that brings me to the whole what's the big deal part. The why the hell did you talk about a game that nobody cares about section. And that's to say two things. The first thing is that this game is a pioneer in Hollywood's involvement with video games. Back then, actors would only appear in cutscenes and FMVs, and it was cool, but it felt like watching a movie and not playing a game. Apocalypse might be the first game to have a Hollywood star be fully immersed in a video game, and it was used to effectively bring this carbon-based lifeform into the virtual world. Sure, his role in development was inevitably reduced, but the performance you saw in the game did not reflect Bruce Willis's true intentions. Looking at the behind-the-scenes footage, you can tell he really gave it his all and wanted to see this game be successful. Bruce Willis even said that he wanted to be a part of this project because of the involvement of new technology that can quite literally put him inside the game. With time, the use of motion capture, texture mapping, and more effective game direction can bring these famous figures into video games and make it feel like you were actually in an adventure with them. More and more games are doing it now, and I think it's incredible, even though it's super expensive and time consuming, but that's a discussion for another day. And the second thing, as weird as it sounds, is that this game is responsible for the evolution of skateboarding. Apocalypse was responsible for making the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series what it was, because of its game engine. The game was first pitched to Tony Hawk with Bruce Willis wearing his combat gear, riding a skateboard, and doing some steezy frontside flips. According to Tony Hawk, the controls just made sense to him, and he immediately loved the prototype that was sent. Tony Hawk agrees to be part of development, making sure the game fully represents how exciting skateboarding can be, and the rest is history. The game sells a bunch of copies, Tony Hawk becomes big in the gaming scene, and skateboarding gets introduced to a wider, more casual audience. And that's all due to the development of this Bruce Willis game. But also because the Tony Hawk games are just fun to play. I have a life, I swear. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos in the future. Also, thank you so much for helping me get to 1,000 subscribers. There's a lot more content to be made and I'm just getting started. Anyway, take care and I'll see you in the next one.